So hey everybody, Professor Steins here, and this is hopefully going to be a quick video about the differences in submit button and button, or input type equals submit and input type equals button. Essentially they kind of look the same, but they really have kind of two different differences. So in the beginning of in the semester, we would start by kind of making an output container and maybe an input tag, input type equals text. ID equals first name, it's a text box, and then we would put an input type equals button. Kind of like this. Just a real kind of simple to get us started back in the beginning of the semester. Nothing to real tie to it, but what we would do is we'd come in with some JavaScript down at the bottom and try to tie that together to do validation. And that would be window on load equals init. Kick this thing up when the page loads, and then we need to define the function init. And so what I might actually want to find is that button that exists, button go, and I need to look at the document and get element by ID. And that ID would be button go. And that would be on click. I'll call it like my validate. And that's essentially kind of what we did this whole semester. We'll make a validate function, my validate. And find the text box. And that would be the first name, document.getElement by ID, fname. And then we'd find the output, my out, and find it out on the document as well. Out. And let's just test it real quick with an inner HTML. So if this works well, when the window loads, we find the button. When the button gets clicked, we call validate. Validate finds the two boxes, but for right now, it's just going to throw hello world into the empty container. So that kind of works. Well, essentially what we do is we'd say if fname value is equal to a blank string, my out.innerHTML is equal to valid. Else not valid. And so in the final, a lot of people kind of figured out, probably got this far with their JavaScript trying to make it work. That value. If it's not equal to a blank string, kind of got that logic backwards. If the first name is not equal to a blank string, then it's valid. Else it's not valid. So not valid and valid. Not valid. So the problem, I guess, a lot of people had is that if we make a form tag for this guy, which is when we really kind of started talking about PHP, is we would add a form, and method is going to be equal to post. There is kind of technically an action attribute on here as well. By default, action posts to the same page, so I haven't really been using a whole lot of it, just because we do it kind of in the right page. So we need a closing form tag. This is essentially where our prints to the server happen. So our PHP block would need to kind of look at the page. Oops. And echo if is set the post button. And what we don't have here though is let's see, let me just type this out real quick. We have an input type equals button. I'm going to go ahead and put names on these guys too, because that's what gets passed with the form tag. And it's kind of important to note that the form tag is kind of what we're dealing with now. Before we were just kind of defining two controls and using a button to tie them together. Name button go. I'm going to also throw in another button, and that's the input type equals submit. This way we can actually kind of see the difference between the two. So button sub, submit, and that's what we're going to check in the post variable. We're going to check that button sub is made. That kind of being the name attribute here of the submit button. So I still have two buttons here. This one should work kind of the same, valid and not valid. However, submit is going to post kind of no matter what. So what a lot of people would do is they'd kind of look down, kind of be thinking about this statement and do the same thing but for the submit button instead, which really to change it all I got to do is find the other control on the page, button sub. So this one probably shouldn't do anything now, nothing's really tied to it. But when I hit the submit button here, again, the video might not show it, but it's really fast. You might actually see valid and posted, or you might actually see not valid and posted, because it's kind of doing both. What submit is doing is posting the form tag. It's not kind of doing anything directly of its own. Technically, we could kind of also use in the PHP statement here, we're checking for button sub, but we don't really have to necessarily do that. We could check for another post variable that's coming through with the form and use that instead. Hit enter. So still won't do nothing. I still kind of get that double post feature where you might see both at the same time. So flip this guy back to button sub. And so whole point of the video is that we want this function to kick off when we submit the form to be posted, because the button go on its own isn't actually going to post the form back to the server. So I'm going to turn this guy down here back to button go, and that would get us back hopefully to our original kind of not valid or valid, and this one will just be posted. So if this one ties validation to button, then we're going to need a second one to tie validation to submit. And that's actually by finding the form on the page, not the button that's submitting the form, the actual form itself. And that's my form. Looks like I'm missing a right bracket there. ID equals my form. So now we have this form, and when it gets submitted, and that's on submit, we want to my validate. Now the difference kind of between the two is that on submit is going to be kind of expecting a true or a false with it. Button click is not. Button click is just like a subroutine that runs. This is more of like kind of a function that runs and returns a value. So if my validate's being called from that, we kind of need to return a value here. So we'll return true if it's valid, and we'll return false if it's not. Let's take a look, and should kind of get our regular functionality here, valid and not valid, on this launch button. But let's check out the submit button. If we try to submit it, and get it not valid, and if we put something in there and click go, then it's posted. Essentially, these guys are kind of breaking that value there, kind of returning that value, saying whether or not the form tag should submit. When we're submitting it, let's validate it, and if it's good, let's keep going, and if it's not, let's stop. That's essentially what's kind of going on there. So I've still got the double post last time. I commented out the valid part, just so that hopefully we'll not see the difference. Might see a little bit of screen flash on the page. But that's essentially what was needed to sort of tie together the JavaScript validation with the form post. So if I posted you a big giant message in your Dropbox about, this is kind of how I would do it, because one, I can still kind of check it here. Well, let me uncomment this guy again. Uncomment that. There you go. It says it's valid, says it's not valid. We're not really dealing with the form value post. I'm kind of using this button as a testing, just to kind of make sure that JavaScript works before I try to post. And so during development phase, I might actually have both of these on my page and kind of use them both. But when the time comes, I just kind of take that guy out and maybe just turn off the ties to the button itself. Just kind of there in the beginning to kind of help me out. And part of that reason too is that if you have an error kind of in your page that's going to break your JavaScript or something like that, missing a period, missing a thing. The problem here is that this, it's not going to work here, right? But what this guy would actually do would still post the form. Because the default for this guy is to submit. It's going to submit kind of no matter what unless you stop it. But because we have a JavaScript error here, and it might not even really be that easy to find, especially if we only had the submit button rolling, there's a little flash that occurs down here when it happens. But if we used kind of an input button in conjunction, at least during the testing phase, we might actually be able to see that error before the page kind of refreshes. So it's kind of my justification for saying, at least in the beginning when you're kind of working through stuff, 2 buttons actually might be better. One actual button, one actual submit button. Difference being is that submit is actually submitting the form, whereas button is just kind of a clicky thing we put on the page so that we can tie it together and make something happen on the client side. That's kind of the important part. Form is pretty much where the interaction with the server occurs. So anyway, that kind of justifies, like I said, in the beginning of the class, I don't really talk a whole lot about form and submit. Instead, we just kind of focus on controls and tying them together and doing JavaScript validation. And I think I covered it a little bit better in the lecture videos this semester than last semester. I had actually, a lot of people had trouble with this, but there were actually a few people that figured it out and got it working. So last semester, I think I didn't cover it quite as much, especially when we transitioned to PHP and kind of started using the form tag. So anyway, hopefully this answers a lot of questions that a lot of people had, and hopefully when you tinker in the future, it'll be easier. You'll kind of have an idea, and maybe you'll take the 2-button approach here just to kind of work on stuff. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the class, and if you got any questions, hopefully I'll see you again. I like talking about code, so if you're working on personal stuff, I don't mind looking at it. So have a good one. Bye.